friends, कैसे हो आप लोग? Myself Pushpender Singh, and we are going to start with our daily current affairs, right? As you know that these lectures are entirely based on the current affairs for the civil services examination, for which you must be studying the national newspapers like the Hindu and Indian Express, and we are also referring these two national newspapers for these current affairs lectures. You can subscribe our channel on the YouTube for these lectures, which can be supplementing your preparation in that respect. Okay, so you can subscribe our channel on the YouTube for these lectures. So let's begin with the lecture. Okay, so first news is all about the delimitation exercise in the Jammu and Kashmir. As you know that the Jammu and Kashmir, the Reorganization Act 2019 have removed or have taken back the special status which was given to the Jammu and Kashmir, right? And after subsequent passing of this Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Act, right, the Jammu and Kashmir have been converted into the Union Territory. Apart from the Jammu and Kashmir, the Ladakh, right, the Ladakh was also become, the Union Territory. So we are more concerning about the Jammu and Kashmir, which was made a Union Territory by a Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Act 2019. Now, as you know that recently you have seen in the newspapers that the Prime Minister Narendra Modi have held the meetings, right, with various leaders of the Jammu and Kashmir. Right, this meeting is very much important because to kickstart the political activity, right, which was snapped after passing this Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Act 2019. Okay, so in that the government of India also abrogated Article 370, which has given the special status to the Jammu and Kashmir. So this meeting, which was held right in New Delhi, right, it was held in the speculation that there will be possible the legislative assembly elections, right? So the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir is that Union Territory which is having its own legislative assembly also, right? So currently you have the two more union territories with legislative assembly, the Union Territory of Pondicherry, the Union Territory of Delhi, and this is the third union territory, which is the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. Okay, so it is basically necessitating the elections for the legislative assembly of the Jammu and Kashmir. But before that, the delimitation exercise has to be completed, but that was not completed. Okay, so elections in the Jammu and Kashmir was due, right, since 2018, right, since June 2018, when the government of the Jammu and Kashmir have been formed, right? That was the government at that point of the time. It was a coalition government between the BJP and the PDP government, right? Subsequently, the PDP basically, have taken the support, and ultimately, this government fall. And since then, this government is basically brought under the governor's rule. So in that respect, now the legislative assembly's elections are due, right? So before that, this delimitation exercise has to be completed. Okay, so what is the delimitation? The delimitation is basically act of redrawing the boundaries of the assembly, right? For example, in after every census, right, the constitution demand that the reorganization or redrawing of the boundaries of the legislative assemblies, your constituency, that is the geographical area, should be redrawn, right, based on the recent census. So based on the population changes, after every 10 years, the delimitation commission has to be conducted, and these delimitation commission would be framed or would be composed under Article 82 of the Constitution of India. Subsequently, this high-powered body, which is also known as the delimitation commission, is constituted, right? And this body basically carries out the process of the demarcation of the constituent boundaries, okay? And the orders which was given by this delimitation commission are legally binding, right? And they are not subjected to the scrutiny of by any other court, right? So they have the force of the law or force of the court of the law, and even the parliament cannot modify this order which was given by the delimitation commission. Okay, so after every census, right, this delimitation exercise is conducted. So this exercise is conducted by the delimitation commission under Article 82 of the Constitution, and as I told you that these orders which was given by the delimitation commission have the force of the law, right? None of the court in India, including the Supreme Court or the Parliament, can modify the orders which was given by the delimitation commission. Okay, now let us understand about a brief about the delimitation commission composition. It is basically consisting of a chairperson, This chairperson is basically either the sitting judge or the retired judge of Supreme Court. Okay, so it will be chaired by the sitting judge or the retired judge of Supreme Court, as well as it will also consisting of either the chief election commissioner or any other commissioner. Any other, you have the election commissioners also, so any other election commissioner, it will be part of the members of this delimitation commission. Apart from that, there will be election commissioner, the election commissioner in which this delimitation exercise is going on. For example, in the Jammu and Kashmir, there is election commissioner also for the Jammu and Kashmir. So this election commissioner will also be part of this delimitation commission. Apart from that, of at least 5 MPs and 5 MLAs of the state are also chosen as an associate member. So you will have the 5 MPs plus 5 MLAs. These 5 MLAs and 5 MPs are basically associated members. So this delimitation commission consisting of a chairperson who is basically either sitting judge of Supreme Court or the retired judge of Supreme Court. Okay, and it will also consisting of either the chief election commissioner or any other election commissioner. It will also consisting of the election commissioner from that particular state, right? And it will also have the associated members like the 5 MPs and 5 MLAs for that state. Okay, the objective is very simple, that to redraw the boundaries based on the data of the latest census, right? So here the data which was taken right from the district level to the tehsil level to the gram panchayat level, which has been collected, and the new boundaries are basically demarcated, right? So the changing the limits of the constituencies, this process basically change the number of seats also in the state also sometime. Okay, so objective is basically to redraw the boundary that I've explained to you, right, based on some sort of a the data which was collected by the delimitation commission. And apart from that, it will also may change the number of seats. So reorganization basically consisting of the boundaries of the constituencies. Apart from that, the number of seats which were given to the particular state in that particular legislative assembly elections or the general elections of the Lok Sabha, that number of seats may also change with respect to the delimitation exercise. Okay, and most important thing here you must understand is that the current delimitation commission which was set up by the government of India in 2020, it is basically chaired by the retired Supreme Court judge, okay, whose name is Ranjana Prakash Desai. So Ranjana Prakash Desai, who is the current the chairperson of the present delimitation commission which was set up by the government of India, and it was supposed to be dissolved in the month of March 2020, but definitely because of the COVID situation, this was given a 1-year extension. So definitely, right, this delimitation commission would need to conduct this delimitation exercise in the case of Jammu and Kashmir before such legislative assembly elections would be conducted. Okay, here you can see the Prime Minister Narendra Modi, right, looking at the leaders from the Jammu and Kashmir, right, at the political level meet in the New Delhi, right, for the purpose of the delimitation commission and for the purpose of making the consensus with all the political leaders so that the smooth transition to the elections of the Jammu and Kashmir Legislative Assembly would be conducted in the state of Jammu, in the union territory of Jammu and Kashmir. Okay. Next, the news is all about the Dawaki. The Dawaki is basically a small town. It's a town in Jaintia district, or specifically in the West Jaintia district in Meghalaya. Okay. Now this Dawaki, which is a town, is in the news because there was report that the National Highway Infrastructure Development Corporation Limited, which is Government of India's PSU, which is mandated for the construction of the national highways or broadening of the national highways all along the town, right, all along the town of the Dawaki, that is from Shillong to the Dawaki. So this the National Infrastructure Development Corporation Limited is basically making or broadening this stretch of the Shillong to the Dawaki, that is around 71 kilometers long stretch, to the 4-lane project, which is estimated to be completed in the near future. So what happens is that there were certain reports in the media that this NHIDCL have cut down, right, or illegally fell down some of the trees which were considered, a bias or the heritage tree in the state of Shillong. So it has created, a lot of protest in the state of Shillong, and subsequently, the chief minister of the Meghalaya, right, which is also known as the Konark K. Sangma, who is the current chief minister of the Meghalaya, have recently, asked the National Highway Infrastructure Development Corporation Limited to immediately halt the construction project or the widening project of the national highway from Shillong to Dharawaki, because it was reported that, right, this National Highway Infrastructure Development Corporation Limited have illegally fell down some of the prominent heritage tree in the state of Meghalaya, Okay, so green activists basically have claimed that they have seen the logs of felling the trees all along the highway of the Shillong and Dharawaki, and the National Highway Infrastructure Development Corporation Limited have taken advantage of the COVID-19 lockdown to fell down and to chop down these pine trees, which was considered a bias to the local people, right? But definitely these were not a statement from the National Highway Infrastructure Development Corporation Limited. Okay, they have said that what they have fell down with those trees that were basically the rotten trees or that were not the living trees, and definitely the compensatory afforestation program is also going on for every one tree that is felled by the National Highway Infrastructure Development Corporation Limited. A compensatory afforestation, right, of the 10 trees will be done in the state of Meghalaya itself. Okay, that is what is basically the statement from this NHIDCL in that respect. Okay, and this is basically a stretch of around 71 kilometers from Shillong to Dharawaki. Okay, and Dharawaki is basically a town in the West Yantia Hill district of Meghalaya. Okay, now you can see here, this is basically a Dharawaki river, which is also known as the Umgot River. This Umgot River basically flows through this Dharawaki, which is a small town, right, nearby the Indo-Bangladesh border, right. You can see this water, which is a crystal clear water. So this water of this Umgot River or the Dharawaki River is so clear and the transparent that even if you just move in the boat, right, you could see, crystal glass surface like that. You can see, the beautiful rocks, pebbles, right, even the fishes which are just floating in the green water. So it's very, very transparent, and it's a transparent river in our country also. Let's understand the next news, that is a futuristic infantry combat vehicle. Okay, recently Indian Army have issued a tender for the request for the purpose of the procurement of around 1750 futuristic infantry combat vehicle. These futuristic infantry combat vehicles would replace the Soviet era or the Soviet designed the infantry vehicles which was in the service of the government of India or with the service of the Indian Army since 1980s onward, right? It's almost 10 years now. The Indian Army have been trying to replace this, the old version of the Russian origin infantry vessels or vehicles with the futuristic infantry combat vehicles. Okay. Now, the most important aspect is that what is this infantry combat vehicle, right? Forget about this futuristic, right? What is this combat vehicle? So, infantry combat vehicles are basically, the infantry fighting vehicles as you call them, because they are basically the armored vehicles, right? And their main purpose is to transport of some sort of a mechanized infantry, right? So these vehicles can carry anywhere from the 5 to 10 soldiers into the battle. For example, if there is a battle, so these combat vehicles can carry the soldiers around 5 to 10 in the range, and which are capable of engaging targets on the ground. That is what we call them infantry, using some sort of a guns or anti-tank missiles. Okay, now what we are talking about, this the futuristic infantry combat vehicle, right, which the Indian Army has intended to procure, right? So this advanced version or this futuristic version of this infantry combat vehicle, right, as per the Indian Army statement, that this basically consisting of some sort of a the advanced version or gun version, a command version, and a command and surveillance version. So here the gun version will be primarily meant for the combat operations, right, would constitute the major or the bulk procurement that belongs to the Indian Army. Okay, as well as this gun version will be capable of housing a crew of 3 to at least 10 members of the Indian Army. Okay, and that will be fighting for the combat operation, as well as it was specified by the Indian Army that it should also be equipped with at least 30 mm main gun as well as the anti-tank missiles, as it was specified by the Indian Army in the request for the information, right? As well as it was also specified that these vehicles will be capable of carrying the drones for the surveillance as well as the suicide strike missions. These suicide strike missions are also known as the loitering munitions, right? It is also known as the loitering munitions. So, you can understand that they are futuristic. Futuristic means they should consisting of as many as advanced features, right? So one such advanced feature is this loitering munitions, which is also known as the suicide strike missions. What is that? It can attack any sort of moving targets, including the one that are armored in that respect. And Indian Army also specified that this advanced version will also consisting of or would also carry some sort of a mini unmanned aerial vehicles that are capable of vertical strike, just like a helicopter, and landing just like a helicopter, right? And like just like helicopter, and it can specify that they will have at least endurance of 60 minutes. That means they can at least can move up to the 60 minutes and can cover at least 10 kilometers of the range. So all such things makes this infantry combat vehicles futuristic. I hope you understand this one. Okay, so Indian Army is a third attempt, right, for the procurement of this new infantry armored vehicle. So definitely it will basically, and would definitely would be put in the cross country operations, for the amphibious operations, in the plain, in the desert terrain, even in the some sort of a high terrains or hilly terrains like up to the 5,000 meters altitude, as well as in the state, in the union territory like Ladakh, as well as in the Sikkim, which is also a hilly state. So it will have the cross-cutting operational, deployment, right? That can be deployed in every terrain, different type of terrain. So it will have the amphibious operations, and it will definitely replace the Russian origin BMP-2 types of armored vehicle, right? And based on the response that the Indian Army would receive, the army will finalize the specifications, and that also would kick-start the procurement process in that respect. Okay, and which also includes some sort of a destroying enemy tanks, armored personnel carriers, combat vehicles, low-flying helicopters. That just now I was explaining you. Okay, so it should include lot of futuristic features in that respect. So it will be this type of armored vehicle or armored combat vehicles. It can house around 3 to 8 or 3 to 10 armed personals, which can carry out the lethal attacks on the enemies in case of the infantry war, or in case of war on the land. Okay. Next, you have the Simchachalam, the temple. This Simhachalam temple is basically located in Andhra Pradesh. So what happens is, recently, right, the Andhra Pradesh High Court cancelled the state government or the government of Andhra Pradesh appointment order, which basically appointed the Sacheta Gajapati Raju as a chairperson of Sri Burha Lakshmi Narsimha Devi Devasthan at Simchalam. Or you can also say that recently the appointment which was made by the government of Andhra Pradesh with respect to the Simchalam temple, right, as well as the Manas Trust, the Mansas Trust. The Mansas Trust, which is also known as the Maharaja Alak Nariam Society of Arts and Science Trust, right? So recently the appointment of the Sacheta Gajapati Raju as the hereditary, head of the trust of the, Mansas Trust, as well as the chairperson of the board of the trustees of the Birha Lakshmi Narsimha Devasthanam at Simchalam in the Visakhapatnam have been recently been declared invalid, right? As the previously the P. Ashok Gajapati Raju, which was the previous chairman of, this trust, was basically reinstated back by the government, by the Andhra Pradesh High Court, right? So in this order, the High Court basically ordered the reinstatement of the Ashok Gajapati Raju, which was also the civil aviation minister with with the UPA government, as the hereditary trustee or the chairperson of the two organizations. So as you know that the Birha Lakshmi Narsimha temple, which is a Simchalam Hindu temple located in the Simchalam hill range, which is around 300 meters above the mean sea level in the Visakhapatnam district of Andhra Pradesh. Okay, so here what is the problem is that the Ashok Gajapati Raju, right, who basically belongs to this Pashupati royal family, right, who was only appointed as the hereditary head of this trust. Okay, which is basically heading this Vijingaram estate, and it was also associated with this Telugu Desam party. Now the current government, which is running by by the another party, have had some problems related to the Ashok Gajpati Raju. So definitely the reinstatement of the Ashok Gajpati Raju is a great blow to the government of Andhra Pradesh, and definitely this Virha Lakshmi Narsimha Devasthanam Trust Board also have around 100 temples under them. The most important temple is the Virha Lakshmi Narsimha temple, which is located in basically in the Visakhapatnam in the Andhra Pradesh. So definitely the Ashok Gajpati Raju was basically chairman of the trust, right? Since 2016 onward, and it was removed by the Jagan Mohan Reddy government in March 2020, right? And the Sacheta Gajpati Raju, which was a daughter of the Ananda Gajpati Raju, the Ananda Gajpati Raju, which was basically the former the chairperson of this trust. After the demise of the Ananda Gajpati Raju, right? The Sacheta Gajpati Raju was basically the basically the daughter of the first wife of the Ananda Gajpati Raju. Now, this Ashok Gajpati Raju was basically the son of the second wife. So what is happening is that these people from the similar family are basically fighting for these hereditary conditions. So here the Ashok Gajpati Raju contended through an PIL which is filed before the Andhra Pradesh High Court, is that this Simchalam Devasthan have been there is a traditions in that the only eldest male lineal descent, right, will only be the chairperson of this Simchalam temple, right, as they belongs to the Pashupati Gajpati family, right, which was the princely state of Vijingaram, right, which was also the hereditary head or hereditary chairperson of this the temple, which was also known as the Simchalam temple. So he alone, he was the eldest male in this lineal descendant. So he alone will be appointed as the hereditary head of this trust. And subsequently, the Andhra Pradesh High Court also approved and reinstated back the P. Ashok Gajpati Raju as the chairperson of this trust. Okay. Regarding this temple, as you know that this temple is basically dedicated to the Lord Vishnu, right? The Lord Vishnu, which was also considered here, right, as the Narsimha, right? As you have seen in the televisions, like the Vishnu, which was manifested in the form of the loin head, right, with the human body, right? So here the devotee or the Prahlada was basically saved from the murder attempt from the Hiranyakashipu, right? You might have seen through the televisions. So here, this devotee of the Vishnu in the form of the Narsimha was basically, is a temple which was dedicated to him. Okay, the Simchalam temple resembles some sort of fortress. If you see from outside, there are three, outer courtyards in that and 5 gateways in that. Okay, the architecture is a mixture of several architectural features like Kalinga architecture, which was flourished in basically in the Odisha. Then Chalukya architecture, which was flourished specifically in the Balakot district of Karnataka, right? The Kakatiya was basically famous during Ganpati Deva Maharaja, specifically in the Barangal, in the Andhra Pradesh itself, as well as the famous Chola. So it's a resemblance of this mixture of this architecture. Okay, and this temple basically faces the west instead of west because of some sort of a signifying the victory which was associated with this basically the state of Vijayagaram. Okay, Simchalam is the basically second largest temple in the state of Andhra Pradesh after Tirumala, which is the most famous world famous temple in the state of Andhra Pradesh. Okay, so here what we are calling about is trust. Okay. Next, the regulation of the microfinance. Here, the Reserve Bank of India have released a consultative document on the regulation of microfinance. So, this consultative document was released, right? It was released to harmonize the various aspects related to the microfinance in our country, right? So, various aspects related to microfinance is that. So, first of all, this consultative document have tried to have this common definition of the microfinance loans throughout the country, right? Which was also trying to cap this outflow on the account of the repayment of the loans with respect to the obligation of the household to the percentage of the household income. So what is happening is that this suggestive framework, which was made by the Reserve Bank of India, is intended to made applicable to all the microfinance loans, right? To all the entity which were regulated by the Reserve Bank of India, and it's aimed at protecting, the microfinance borrowers from the over indebtedness, because there are a lot of variations in the microfinance loans in terms of their interest rate. So definitely the borrowers are basically at the receiving end. So they are again undergoing some sort of indebtedness or over indebtedness, as well as enabling some sort of the competitive forces to bring down the interest rate by empowering these borrowers to make some sort of informed opinion or informed decision in that respect. So here the board also approved the policy for the household income assessment. Okay, so here the most important aspect is that, first of all, is that all sort of the pricing guidelines for NBFCs or MSIC, right, with respect to the NBFCs or non-banking financial companies, the regulator are also observed that all lenders tend to charge very high interest rate in the line with the rates which are charged by this NBFC or microfinance institutions. So ultimately, the borrowers are basically deprived of the benefit from this enhanced competition, right? And there was even falling of the interest rate regime after that. So here the document basically suggests the alignment of these pricing guidelines for these non-banking financial companies or microfinance institutions with the guidelines of NBFCs. So there will be no prepayment penalty for that, and there is no requirement of the collateral, and there will be greater flexibility of the repayment frequency for all microfinance loans in our country. Okay, and there will be introduction of the standard simplified fact sheet on the pricing of the microfinance loans for the better transparency to the basically borrowers. And here the most important aspect is that it also proposes the introduction of the standard simplified fact sheet on the pricing of the microfinance loans, right? Further, it also advises to display of the minimum, maximum, and average interest rate, right, which is charged on the microfinance loans, right, on the websites of the regulated entity. So definitely by displaying of this maximum, minimum, the average interest rate which is charged on the microfinance loans will be of greater boon for the basically borrowers in that respect. Okay. Next, we have the rice bran oil. The rice bran oil is basically recently e-launched by the NAFED, right? So recently the Department of the Food and the Public Distribution have e-launched this rice bran oil. This rice bran oil is basically a oil which is extracted from the the outer layer or outer brown layer of the rice, which is also known as the chaff. So it is also known as the chaff oil or the rice husk oil, or is also known as the rice bran oil. Okay, this basically it is known for the high smoke point that is around 232 degrees Celsius, and it is basically suitable for high temperature cooking methods, right? So you can use it for the various application, and more important is that this rice bran oil basically composition is very similar to the peanut oil, right? For example, you can also see that it has consisting of around 38% monosaturated fat. Okay, it has also 37 percentage of around polysaturated fat. It is also consisting of around 25% of saturated fat. So it is composition is almost similar to the peanut oil, and it is also good for the health also in that respect. Okay, so here the rice, the bran oil, which is composition to the peanut oil, just now I have explained you the composition also. For example, it consisting of 38% of the monosaturated the fats, 38% of around the polysaturated fat, and 25% of the saturated fatty acids in that respect. Okay, the rice bran oil is also having the multiple health benefits. For example, it is basically includes the lowering of the cholesterol due to having the low trans fat, right? Because of the low trans fat, you will have the lower cholesterol in the body, right? So here the most important aspect is that what we are talking about, this cholesterol is basically a waxy substances that may be deposited in your blood, okay, or that may be found in your blood. So your body needs the cholesterol to build the healthy cells, but over existence of this cholesterol in your blood basically ultimately leads to the increasing of the risk of heart disease. So with the high cholesterol, you can develop some sort of a fatty deposits in your blood vessels. But these trans fat are basically all responsible for this high cholesterol in your blood. or deposition of cholesterol. So the trans fat is type of a dietary fat that you basically consume, right? It's a worst form of your fat, or it's a worst for your health. Too much of trans fat in your diet basically increases the risk of heart diseases, yeah, the heart problems in the body. Okay. Next is basically it is also having the high monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fat contains. So the scientific report says that the polyunsaturated fats are potentially better than monounsaturated fats. Okay, and it is also says in the reports that the polyunsaturated fats basically reduce the risk of the various heart related disease by 19%. So as I told you that it is basically consisting of around 38% of the monosaturated fat, right, and 37% of the polysaturated fat in that respect, right. And the next is basically it also boosts, as well as the reduce the risk of the cancer in the body, as it will basically give the higher amount of vitamin E content in the rice bran oil. So what the FASI is trying to do, the rice bran oil basically will be fortified so that it will have this additional nutrients as well as these vitamins. These vitamins may be the vitamin E, right? So it will be fortified. So the rice bran oil will be marketed by the NAFED, which is the National Agriculture Cooperative Marketing Federation of India Limited, which is basically trying to market this type of oil in the market. So definitely it will have the addition of the vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E. So it will be fortified to fulfill at least 25 to 30% of the dietary intake of the vitamin A, the vitamin D, and vitamin E in that respect. And definitely the most important aspect is that it is also recommended by the World Health Organization. And for the what is the benefit for the India? Definitely it will cut down the India's dependence on the imported edible oil that India is basically importing from the various countries, and it will also give impetus to the Atmanirbhar Bharat initiative. So definitely, it will be a great boon for the indigenization of this oil, right? So you have this rice bran oil. Next, you have the Inland Vessel Bill 2021. Right? As the Union Cabinet have given note to the Inland Vessel Bill 2021. So this bill provides, some sort of a the emphasis on, right, the safety, security, and the registration of the inland vessels. So currently, you have around 4,000 kilometers of the inland waterways are operational. So definitely the bill basically regulate the safety, security, and the registration of the inland vessels which basically ply in this inland waterways. Right. The most important aspect is that this bill will have some sort of a unified law, which will also try to replace the old act which was passed in 1970, right? And it was trying to replace this Inland Vessels Act with a new act, right? That is Inland Vessels Bill 2021. Once it will be passed in the parliament, right, it will be replacing this old act. And here you will have the unified law for the entire country, right? Instead of you have the separate rules by the states. So you will have the unified law that will be applicable throughout the country. And the bill also provides that there will be a central database, right, for the recording of the details of the vehicles, the vessel registration number, the crew which is on the portal, just like on the lines of the airport, right? So here you will have to have some sort of the mandatory registration for all mechanically propelled vessels. Even the non-mechanically propelled vessels will also have to have, they have to enroll themselves with the district, taluk, or panchayat level for their registration. Okay, once this certificate of the registration is issued or granted, it will be applicable, right, throughout the states and the union territory. So it will be deemed to be valid in all the states and the union territory, right? And this bill also seeks to provide that there is no need to have the separate permission from the state, right? As currently you need the separate permission from the states. Next, you have the national portal for the transgender persons. So here, the national portal for the transgender person was basically launched by the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment in the year of 2020. So what is in the news is that just in the 6 months, right, after it was launched, right, it has already distributed the certificates to the transgender persons, right? Almost 1,557 certificates have been issued to the transgender person as of the June 16, 2021. Okay, so here this portal was basically launched by the Union Minister for the Social Justice and Empowerment, right, as a national portal for the transgender person for the basically for recognizing this transgender as a third sex. Okay, so the Transgender Person Protection of the Rights Act 2019, which basically came into effect in 10th January 2020. It was a first step, right, for the welfare of the transgender person. To implement these provisions, the Ministry of Social Justice and the Empowerment basically have formulated a rules which is known as the Transgender Persons Protection of the Rights Rules 2020. These rules were basically framed on 29th September 2020, right? And this have been notified in the Gazette Notification of India. These rules basically ensure some sort of a comprehensive welfare measures that reach out to the transgender community and help them to, to come to the mainstream of the society. So here, the most important aspect is that the right of the self-perceived gender identity. So here, the portal will basically help the transgender person, right, for applying for the certificate of the identity card from anywhere in the country. So definitely, this will provide a comprehensive welfare measure, the right of the self-perceived gender identity, and the procedure to issue the transgender certificate and identity card, which have been streamlined through this portal. So most important benefit is that the transgender will be able to get this I-card without any physical verification. So you don't need to present, or you don't need to have visit on any of the government offices without even visiting there. You just upload your affidavit, right, and your as well as the required documents. It will be issuing, the portal will be issuing the identity card in that respect. So through the portal, the transgender can basically monitor their status or the application in that whole process. This process has been made more smoother, hassle-free, to ensure that the transgender person are able to attain their self-perceived identity card without any inconvenience. And these rules have been framed under the act, which was the Transgender Person or Protection of the Rights Act 2019, which was basically came into effect on 10th January 2020. It was a first step for the ensuring of the welfare of the transgender person in our country. Here you can see the transgender persons. Next, the annual review of the state laws 2020. Okay, so here the most important aspect is that the study report, or the report which was given by the PRS Legislative Research, which is a New Delhi think tank, about some sort of the data which is related to the legislative chambers or the legislative wings, right? So here the PRS Legislative Research annual review of the state laws 2020 provides the productivity and efficiency of the state legislatures, right? So here in the 2020 report, this productivity as well as the efficiency of the state legislatures are deemed to be poor, and it is basically covered around 19 states in this study, which basically consisting of around 90% of the population. So here the most important aspect is that only Karnataka legislature, which is also bicameral legislature, met just 31 days last year. It is because of the COVID-19 situations, which is the highest for any other state in our country, right? After Karnataka, the Rajasthan Legislative Assembly met for 29 days, which is followed by the Himachal Pradesh, right? If you compare these states with the parliament just sat for 33 days in the last year due to the lockdown or due to the COVID-19 situations. So definitely, on an average, you can say that the number of sittings, right, that was for the 19 states, that was 18. That was the average number of sittings, which is 11 less than the 4 years average. If you count from 2016 to 2019, the 4-year average was 29. But this average number of sitting, which was as per the study, is 18, which is 11 less than this 4-year average. The other most important data is basically also provided in this annual review of the state laws is that in 2020, right, the number of the days for which the parliament and the state legislative assembly sat was significantly lower. And the most important the data which was brought by this annual review of the state laws is that there was lack of the detailed scrutiny over the bills. For instance, in the year of 2020, right, in the year of 2020, the 59% of the bills, right, which was passed on the same day, right, that was introduced in the legislature. So you could understand that only 59% or sorry, the 59% bill passed on the same day which was introduced, and there was no such discussions on the bill, no such referring of the bill to the parliamentary standing committee, and only 14% of the bills, right, which was basically passed within the day of their interview in that respect. And in the parliament, the bills are often referred to the parliamentary standing committee. So here you could understand that without referring to the parliamentary standing committee, because the parliamentary standing committees are not functioning or not existent because of the COVID-19 situation or because of political reasons. So here the number of bills which was passed, which was highest in the case of Karnataka. So Karnataka passed 61 bills, which is followed by the Tamil Nadu, which passed 42 bills, followed by Uttar Pradesh, which passed 37 bills in that respect. Okay, and the most poor performers in this category of passing the bill is Delhi, which only passed one bill. The West Bengal passed just two bills, and Kerala passed three bills in that respect. Okay. Next, you have Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. So recently, as you know, the Delhi High Court have granted the bail to the three students, right? The two students belong to the Jawaharlal Nehru University, that is Devangana Kalita and Natasha Narwal. Both are female students of the JNU. And the third student belongs to the Jamia Millia Islamia, that is the Asif Iqbal Tanha, right? All three were arrested by the Delhi police, right, under Unlawful Activities Prevention Act or UAPA in respect to the connection of the riots which was there in Northeast Delhi in 2020. So here, these three students, the two female student and one male student, was arrested by the Delhi police of conspiring to orchestrate the communal violence in the Northeast Delhi. So all three were arrested basically under UAPA, and the Delhi police basically alleged that the three student activists were part of the larger conspiracy in the violence that followed the protests related to the Citizenship Amendment Bill or Citizenship Amendment Act last year, right? Here, the Kalita or Devangana Kalita and Natasha Narwal, both are the members of the Women's Rights Group, the Women's Right Group in JNU, that is known as the Pinjara Tod, or simply the breaking of a cage. Okay, the Tanha was basically a student of the Jamia Millia Islamia, or Asif Iqbal Tanha was basically a student in that respect. Okay, now most important aspect is that the the Delhi High Court basically says that there is no concrete definition of the terrorist or the terrorism in that Unlawful Prevention Activities Act. Even the definition of the terrorist act is basically wide and somewhat vague as per the verdict which was given by the Delhi High Court, right? So here the phrase terrorist act in the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act should not be equated with the other criminal act, right? Which basically falls in the conventional offenses rather than treating them as the terrorist act. So they should not be equated. And even the Delhi High Court says that the word terrorism and the terror, which was not defined in the Unlawful Prevention Activities Act. So here the courts must be very careful of using this Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, right, which is also related to the arresting of the students related to or the civil activists specifically related to the protest. So here the clashes were basically broke out, right, between the supporters of the Citizenship Amendment Act as well as those opposing, right, those Citizenship Amendment Act, specifically on the February 23rd and 26th, right, in between. And there was huge people that was killed, around 53 people killed, and hundreds of the people were basically injured, right? And the police basically imposed this Unlawful Prevention Activities Act on these three students in that respect. So that's all for today. Thank you very much. We'll meet again tomorrow for our next current affairs. Thank you.